Are you being poisoned? From our perspective, we don't believe this really is a question. What do you think? Have you ever taken your time to actually read the ingredients in your products? We are not referring to scanning across them, but actually checking every single word in a dictionary or Wikipedia, for example. Have you ever gone further and then taken some of these components to see how they are made or even by whom? When we first really realized the severity of this, and the mind-blowing, if not to say perverse magnitude, this is at, we felt like throwing up, stop eating and drinking altogether, giving up, and we lost all faith and trust in everything we had to eat, drink or use. Going in a shopping center suddenly felt like going to choose your coffin, and as we are at it, even stand in queue to be executed. Once you start taking an in-depth view of this and what exactly daily usage items like Teflon, and tin cans, or common food additives such as aspartame, high fructose syrup, and fluoride, GM foods or GMO in general, or then common products such as air fresheners, cleaners, disinfectants, insecticides, pesticides, shower gel and beauty products, all the way to machines like microwaves, X-rays and mobile phones are made of, not to mention their origins stemming from the most anti-survival organizations that exist. It's shocking to think how they have developed, produced and commercialized all this right in front of us, and it being induced into everyone's life by simply forgetting to mention the "oh by the way" aspect of it all. We have more detail on some of these within our need-to-know topics. However, to summarize this, we would actually like to ask you a couple of simple questions instead of making a statement. Would you employ and pay a babysitter with official acquired credentials, who followed a special child education training and is certified in child education and behaviors, if you were also told that that person, in the past, used to be a known child abuser and as part of a completely separate activity, nothing to do with their nanny organization, founded a group that studies the child's mind in order to manipulate it to serve as a slave? Or would you consume and bite tomatoes that were grown on a field close to where you live by a farmer, if you were also told that that farmer happens to be the inventor of the most effective rodent poison and the most effective, lethal, pesticide, as well as the inventor of tomato seeds, that already contain these strains of poison and toxins in its DNA, in order to not have to spray and protect the tomatoes anymore? Or would you buy and use storage containers made for your food, liquids and objects, if you were also told that the company developing and producing these, happens to be the company that produces all the decomposable coffins for the government, in case of disaster, runs a side business of developing bio, chemical and traditional weapons for wars, funded by whatever country paid the most, regardless of their motives, and they test these weapons for efficiency every now and then, in poorer countries? Let's move on. Cyanide, hemlock, arsenic, botulinum. If we were now to tell you that some very small amounts of these have virtually no effect on you and that in trace amounts may actually not harm you, would you be willing to take any of these, in such a minuscule trace amount on a daily basis voluntarily? For us, as we mention in some of our other posts, there is no halves, or in-betweens, when it comes to poisons and toxins. Either something is, or is not toxic or poisonous. We would say it's more than just ignorant to say, yeah, but in small amounts it's harmless. Think about the long-term accumulation and repetitive exposure for a minute. Randall Fitzgerald, the author of The 100-Year Lie, How Food and Medicine Are Destroying Your Health, actually stated this beautifully in an interview with Natural News, and much more, of course. I strongly suggest reading his book. It may shock you, but it's better to know this than staying in the dark about it. Here is an extract from the interview. Fitzgerald: there are two big, and by big I mean monumental, problems with the argument and the perspective taken by federal regulatory agencies and by the manufacturers of foods and medicines. The argument is that trace levels of these chemicals do no harm to human health. What that argument ignores is the cumulative effect of hundreds, if not thousands, of these chemicals entering and then mixing within the human body. This is known as the body burden. We each carry a body burden of these synthetic chemicals. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, starting in 1999, began testing the blood of thousands of Americans to determine what synthetic chemicals are being carried in their blood, their body fat and their body organs. The results of these tests, more than 10,000 people have been tested so far, is that every single person tested was found to carry hundreds of these synthetic chemicals. The problem here is that our bodies do not recognize these synthetic chemicals, most of which have been invented, patented and produced since World War II. Our livers, which are the main detoxifying organs of our bodies, do not recognize these synthetic chemicals, and as a result, do not metabolize them. Instead, the chemicals are either pushed off into the far reaches of the liver, to be stored, or sent into body fat and body organs to be stored. As these toxins accumulate, they begin to interact with each other. This is where the problem, that regulatory agencies and manufacturers want to overlook, becomes a health disaster for us. That is the problem of synergies, the synergistic reactions of two or more chemicals in the body. When they interact, it is much more powerful than any one individual chemical can do on its own. It may be true, manufacturers and regulatory agencies insist that it is true, that these chemicals, in trace amounts on their own, may be harmless to human health. I have a question about that, but I don't really deal with that in depth in the book. Instead, I look at what happens when all of these chemicals accumulate in the human body and they interact with each other to create toxic synergies. This, I believe, is the key to the explosion in human illness and disease levels that we have seen since World War II. Just to top this all off, how do you feel if we were now to tell you that as per the current ingredient guidelines there is still no requirement for companies to list various chemical contaminants, pesticides, heavy metals and other substances that have a direct impact on your health? Also, foods containing 0.5 grams or less of trans fatty acids per serving is allowed to claim it as zero. This would really be fine, if it wasn't for the rule that the companies are allowed to define the serving size. So it doesn't take a maths genius to turn 5 grams in total, divided by 10 servings, leaving 0.5 grams per serving, and the product now magically has 0 trans fats on the label. This doesn't just apply to trans fats, there is a whole list of things that can be set to 0, you just need to go and look at the official FDA site. Is this not enough? Did you know that there is a difference between 100% organic and organic? The difference is that you are allowed to call something organic if it contains less than 5% non-organic ingredients. There are many more tricks and methods to get around ingredients or simple ways on how to fool even the well-educated on this subject. You can learn about this all very fast, just search the internet, if you're hungry. But what to do with all this horror? If you now feel demotivated or overwhelmed, don't. It's not all that bad. And there is plenty of good and honest companies out there that are producing superfood, as we now call it. There is always the organic route, which we take, wherever and whenever we can. 95% is still a lot better than nothing, and the likelihood of less contaminant is very high. Also, this doesn't really mean you can never have one of them lovely gummy bears again, just less. A lot less maybe, and try the organic ones at least. Work to do the best wherever you can, and support the least amount of non-organics. Support your body with good water, distilled water, and natural vitamins. It's not all bad, there are many people like us, and yourself out there, that still care, create and produce good products, machines and superfoods. Also, always remember that the evil elites, so to say, that are doing this, only represent about 2% of us all. So, if 98% say, stop, or just stop consuming, they would have no choice.